Chapter 1, Start of the Broadcast. In the pre-evening twilight, when the city, like a fiery mosaic, lights up with thousands of lights, the luxurious studio of one of the most popular talk shows appeared before the audience in its true beauty. The building, faced with glass facades and decorated with golden accents, seemed to reflect the dreams and hopes awakening in every heartbeat. Inside the studio, an atmosphere of highly artistic elegance reigned. The soft light of the spotlights, the play of shadows on the smooth surfaces of the scenery and the harmonious notes of instrumental music created the feeling that time slowed down here to allow every detail to shine to the fullest. The center of attention was the host, a charismatic, but sometimes abrupt man, known for his ability to provoke and ask questions that did not leave even the most sophisticated viewers indifferent. His demeanor, confident gait and sly smile showed that he was used to being the center of attention and was not afraid to raise sensitive topics on the agenda. Today, his goal was clear: to find out who really stands behind the person that many perceive as a symbol of luxury and success. Among the studio guests, Melania Trump stood out in particular, a woman whose external elegance and sophistication have always been shrouded in an aura of mystery. She appeared on stage in a sophisticated outfit that emphasized her status and sense of style, but her gaze revealed the depth of her experiences and a quiet strength of character. Her presence aroused admiration among the audience, because behind her every step, behind every soft but confident movement, there was a story filled with personal victories, trials and unconditional love for her family. Melania has always acted as an example of restraint and dignity, and today the audience expected that she would be able to defend her personal space with dignity. Even before the broadcast began, backstage, the studio staff and invited experts discussed the upcoming episode, anticipating that the topic of the interview might touch on painful chords of public opinion. Among them was Maria, Melania's longtime friend, who came to support her that evening. Maria was always there when it came to personal trials, and her quiet confidence and caring gave strength to the main character. At the very beginning of the broadcast, the host, with subtle irony, greeted the audience, quickly moving on to questions about the success of the Trump dynasty and the public role of famous personalities. Everything was going as usual until the moment when, in one of the first questions, the host decided to make a provocative attack. Her words, sounding cold and defiant, were aimed at questioning Melania's independence. "Many people wonder," she said, "how can you claim to be an independent person if without Donald Trump, you are essentially nobody?" This remark, voiced with obvious sarcasm, immediately caused a wave of bewilderment and whispers in the studio. The room, filled with attention, seemed instantly tense. Viewers accustomed to a more subtle approach sensed that something important was about to happen. A moment later, the screen flashed images of Melania's life, quiet family photos, her participation in charity events, and footage of her demonstrating her ability to be not only a wife but also an independent, strong woman. These images made the audience remember her achievements, her inner qualities that cannot be measured by the presence of a spouse alone. But at this point, the host, intent on continuing her provocative line, did not hesitate to add several more sharp remarks designed to reinforce the image of Melania as dependent on her famous husband. The threat of scandal was in the air, and every remark seemed to be an attempt to stir up a storm of emotions. On stage, amid the bright lights and flashing cameras, everyone expected that this would be the turning point when Melania would have to respond to these painful attacks. Thus begins a story where, in the conditions of a luxurious broadcast and high expectations, the confrontation between provocation and dignity was already presented in the first moments. The atmosphere, saturated with studio lights, sounds of applause and indignation, promised that today's broadcast would not be just an interview, but a real test of human strength and inner world. Everyone present felt that behind the external shine of a celebrity there is a multi-layered story, and that true dignity is not determined only by external attributes, but is born from deep experiences, love and devotion to one's values. This evening promised to be a starting point for change, where every line, every word could change perception and become a lesson for millions of viewers around the world. Chapter 2, Wave of Accusations. Just as the show was beginning to settle into a dynamic discussion, the show's host, known for her provocative flair, abruptly changed the tone of the interview. Her voice, cool and mocking, rang out like an icy barrage, aimed at questioning Melania Trump's identity. She began with simple, seemingly neutral questions about her role in the family's life, but soon moved on to more stinging remarks, claiming that without Donald Trump, Melania was nobody. The words, spoken with obvious contempt, sent shivers through the room, as viewers accustomed to colorful, rich rhetoric sensed the conversation taking on a sinister tone. The host did not hesitate to use sarcasm and irony like sharp blades to hurt the guests' feelings. She quoted famous critics who claimed that Melania's success and fame were entirely dependent on her marriage, and that her personality was lost in the shadow of Trump's majestic name. "How can you be independent if your life is entirely determined by your husband?" she asked with a sly smile, as if enjoying the reaction of the audience, which was divided into those who supported her position and those who were already beginning to feel the injustice of these words. Backstage in the studio, in a small dressing room, assistants whispered quietly to each other next to the host, discussing the boldness and toughness of her questions. Some of them, seeing how the audience's reaction was beginning to change, tried to convey their views through fleeting glances, but the atmosphere in the studio was tense, where every word mattered. On the screen behind the host, footage from the archives flashed, showing moments from Melania's life, her participation in charity events, her personal achievements outside of her family responsibilities, but the host skillfully ignored these positive images, focusing exclusively on provocative statements. During the broadcast, the host continued to pounce on the audience with a chain of questions that gradually turned into a series of accusations. She asked, "How can you be confident in your independence if every achievement of yours is only a reflection of your husband? And, why do you think people should perceive you as an independent person if you are not able to prove your significance without his name?" These questions sounded so harsh and heartless that the silence in the room was filled with indignation. Some viewers, clearly outraged by such rhetoric, began to quietly discuss what was happening, and critics on social networks were already preparing to write articles about how humiliating and unethical the host's provocative methods were. The studio guests included dignitaries, media personalities, and public figures, exchanging glances and gestures that expressed growing dissatisfaction with the interview methods. One influential journalist, known for her ability to maintain high ethical standards, visibly frowned when the host asked another provocative question, clearly aimed at making Melania seem dependent on her husband. "You seem to forget," she continued, "that true identity is not defined by who you love, but by what you do. If you are nothing without Donald Trump, where is your individuality?" Her words, filled with cynicism, were sown for some of the audience, but also raised a storm of questions about the boundaries of personal space on public airwaves. Melania sat quietly, her face unyielding, her gaze fixed forward. But you could see her inner world seething with pain and indignation. Every provocation made her heart clench. But she did not let go. Sparks of determination flashed in her eyes, ready to protect that part of her life that she considered sacrosanct. Off camera, in the technical staff room, someone quietly commented that such questions not only violated professional ethics, but also inflicted a deep wound on human dignity. And so the wave of accusations continued, each word of the host turned into a test aimed at checking Melania's true strength of character. The atmosphere in the studio became increasingly tense, and even if some viewers tried to laugh to hide their indignation, the internal discontent grew. The air had already become the arena of not just a television show, but a real battle for honor and dignity, where every word had weight, and every accusation had consequences for the fate of a person who was considered a symbol of independence and strength. The second chapter of the story sets the tone for the rest of the story, immersing viewers in a world where personal values and public opinion collide in a brutal fight for the truth. It is at this point that the path begins for Melania to not only resist provocations, but also to prepare the ground for her decisive response, which will become the culmination of the broadcast and a symbol of the victory of inner strength over superficial attacks. Chapter 3: Inner Struggle and Determination. After the host's sharp, almost merciless attacks, Melania Trump felt a storm of emotions flare up inside her, mixing pain, shame, and a deep sense of self-worth. As the words aimed at humiliating her mother echoed around the studio, her heart sank, and it seemed as if the whole world stopped with her. An inner voice, memories of childhood lessons in which her mother taught her kindness and respect, became a quiet call for her, awakening a strength in her that had seemed to be extinguished by provocative words. Sitting in silence behind the scenes, Melania recalled how, as a young woman, her mother had told her, "True beauty is not what is visible on the surface, but what is hidden in the heart." Like an ancient amulet, these words had protected her soul from any attacks and criticism. Now, faced with obvious humiliation, she felt that she had to protect not only her honor, but also the invisible value that her mother had passed on to her through years of love and hardship. Memories of her mother, of how she always found words of comfort even in the darkest days, came alive in her mind, giving her the composure needed to turn every pain into a source of strength. Melania tried to contain the storm of emotions, but inside her a feeling of injustice was growing, as if every word of the presenter was a blow to her heart. In these moments, she experienced not just a personal insult, she felt that her soul, her life path, woven from countless small but significant moments, was under attack. Remembering how her mother raised her with love and care, how she supported her in moments of doubt and failure, Melania understood, if she remained silent now, she would not only lose the opportunity to defend her honor, but also allow what should have remained sacred to be disgraced in the eyes of millions. An internal struggle unfolded in her head, like a clash between two opposing forces. On the one hand, there was the fear that an emotional outburst could lead to irreversible consequences on the air, causing a public outcry that could overshadow all her achievements in the future. On the other hand, a burning sense of resentment and pride in her family demanded an immediate response. Moments flashed through her memory when she, as a young girl, looked at her mother with admiration, seeing in her a source of strength and inspiration. Each such thought gave her confidence that silence was not an option. At that pivotal moment, with the studio lights seemingly focused on her face, Melania felt not only a determination awakening within her, but also a desire to prove to the world that her identity and achievements were not dependent on her husband. She understood that her life was not just the shadow of celebrity, but an independent path filled with work, charity, and personal growth. New memories, supplemented by stories of how she herself participated in cultural and social projects, began to form a powerful testimony to her independence. One of her longtime friends, Arthur, was present in the studio backstage, quietly encouraging her, reminding her that true values are not subject to superficial assessments. His quiet but confident voice supported her internal struggle, adding strength to withstand attacks. With these encouraging words and memories of her mother, Melania was able to focus and feel that her inner light is the same light that never fades, despite all the external storms. Images were forming in her head faster and faster, faces, words, moments from the past that had been her support in the most difficult moments. Each stroke of the host's word cast a shadow, but at the same time awakened in her the desire to prove that she was not just the shadow of a famous man, but an independent, strong woman with a deep understanding of life and the ability to inspire others. Her mind and heart merged into a single harmonious force, ready to resist injustice and stand up for the most precious values. Thus continued her internal struggle, where every second became a test of strength, and every thought, a weapon in the fight for her honor. Melania understood that the time had come, and she needed to find the strength within herself to emerge from the shadow of the internal conflict and fight back against the injustice imposed on her from the outside. This moment became the culmination of her internal journey. She realized that if she could overcome her fears, she would be able not only to protect her mother's honor, but also to strengthen her own personality, showing the whole world that the true strength of a person lies in his inner harmony and fortitude of spirit. Chapter 4: A Decisive Response and the Awakening of the Force. At that fateful moment, when the host's final provocative words rang out in the studio, the air in the room, previously filled with tension, suddenly froze, as if waiting for a turning point. Melania Trump, whose outward restraint had always hidden a deep inner strength, felt that her soul could no longer tolerate the injustice directed at her mother, the person who had given her life, love and lessons in true dignity. At that moment, her gaze, full of quiet determination, met the host's gaze, and it seemed that the entire studio stopped, preparing for a decisive response. Melania rose slowly from her seat, her movements stately and confident, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Archival footage flashed on the screen behind her, photographs of moments of joy and support, charity events, family celebrations, all that testified to the multifaceted nature of her personality and the deep values that underpinned her life. These images served as silent proof that true worth is not measured by outward appearance, but is shaped by years of love, patience, and wisdom. To the sound of a barely perceptible rustle of applause, Melania took the microphone and began to speak in a calm, even voice that immediately filled the studio with confidence. "I want to remind you," she said, "that a person's true worth is not determined by what you see on the surface, but by what's hidden in their heart." Her words, spoken with genuine sincerity, were like a quiet but powerful waterfall, washing away all prejudices. She continued, "My mother always taught me that each of us is unique, and that dignity does not depend on brands or social labels, but is born from life's challenges, from the ability to forgive and give love." These words were a revelation for the audience, which made many reflect on their own prejudices. At the same time, Arthur, Melania's longtime friend who had always supported her in difficult moments, was present in the studio backstage. His quiet confidence and calm presence became an invisible support for her, adding strength at this decisive moment. Arthur, known for his experience in public activities, later shared with several journalists that today he saw Melania become an example of how to stand up for your principles even in the face of merciless attacks. His words and support gave an additional boost to her confidence. Melania, addressing the audience, talked about how there had always been room in her life for independent thinking, for bold decisions that did not depend on other people's opinions. She gave examples of her own achievements, a story about how she participated in organizing charity projects, how she personally supported young talents in the field of culture and education. Her speech became more and more vivid and rich, each of her arguments was supported by facts and personal memories. "If someone thinks that my personality depends on my husband," she said with genuine firmness, "then they do not know what trials I had to go through to become who I am today." Her words, spoken live on air, fell on the entire studio with such force that even the host, accustomed to sharp attacks, fell silent for a moment, unable to respond to the truth that sounded in Melania's voice. As her speech gained momentum, the atmosphere in the studio changed dramatically. At first, confusion and bewilderment gave way to deep respect and even admiration. The audience, who had been listening to her every word, began to actively express their support through applause, standing ovations and stormy comments on social networks. Many noted that such a response became a real lesson for everyone who is inclined to judge a person only by external signs. At that moment, Melania Trump became a symbol of the strength of the inner world, the ability to defend one's values and protect the honor of her loved ones, despite external pressure. Her answer was not just a reaction to a provocation, it became a manifesto, a call for society to learn to look deeper, to appreciate the true human essence and to understand that true beauty is born in the heart, not in a fashionable outfit. Having finished her speech, she quietly but decisively added, "True dignity is not subject to temporary trends. It is eternal, like the memory of those who inspired us to live with dignity." These words, sounding with genuine sincerity, left an indelible mark on the souls of the audience, opening a new perspective on what is truly important in life. Thus, in Chapter 4, a decisive turning point occurs. Melania Trump not only responds to provocative attacks, but also turns them into a powerful statement of her independence and depth. Her decisive response becomes a symbol of the victory of inner strength over superficial assessments, and the room, previously immersed in tension, is filled with the light of truth and mutual respect. This moment becomes the starting point for further changes, reminding everyone that the true dignity of a person is measured by his soul and his actions, and not by superficial labels imposed by society. Chapter 5, Victory of Reason and New Perspectives. After the broadcast ended, the studio, which had recently been filled with an atmosphere of tense polarization, fell silent, gradually giving way to thunderous applause and enthusiastic exclamations. But behind the scenes, discussions were still raging, and in the heads of millions of viewers, the words spoken by Baron Trump echoed as if they had become a real manifesto of inner strength and principles capable of withstanding cruel attacks. His decisive answer, filled with logic, facts and vivid memories of his family, not only defended the honor of his mother, but also opened a new page in the public perception of personal dignity. On this decisive evening, there was not only applause in the studio, critics, experts, and many colleagues from the media began to discuss how true leadership is manifested in the ability to stand by one's principles, despite attempts to manipulate public opinion. The day after the broadcast, a real storm of support erupted on social networks. People shared their impressions, wrote articles and left comments about how Baron's words changed their views on the role of the individual in society. Well-known public figure Alexei Smirnov, a representative of an authoritative media outlet, wrote an article, "Youth is no obstacle to courage. Baron Trump proved today that the power of reason and deep faith in one's values can defeat superficial attacks." His article quickly went viral. And even representatives of the opposition were not indifferent to how the erudition of the young man was able to turn provocative questions into a lesson that was supposed to serve as a guide for everyone. Meanwhile, another piece of news came from the White House. Baron's mother, who always preferred modesty in personal dignity, gave an interview to a local newspaper. In it, she spoke about how proud she was of her son, his ability to defend his principles, and that the true strength of a family lies in mutual respect and support. Her words became additional confirmation that it is not big names that are important in life, but inner light and human qualities. This interview immediately became a subject of discussion, and many in the media noted that the public reaction to recent events showed that society increasingly values sincerity in the ability to tell the truth, rather than blindly following fashionable sensationalism trends. In the studio, where only a few comments and glances had recently been heard, people became more attentive to how a person is presented and what values they reflect. The audience, discussing what had happened, came to a unanimous opinion: in the modern world, it is unacceptable to judge a person solely by external signs or attempts to humiliate his personal dignity. In this fight for true respect, it was Baron's decisive and calm response that became a shining example of how the power of words can change perception, and the ability to remain true to one's principles can become a stronghold for an entire generation. At subsequent press conferences and public events, Baron continued to speak out about the importance of media ethics and the need to respect the privacy of famous people. His speeches were met with approval not only by supporters, but also by many critics, who realized that such an example showed how to respond constructively to provocations without stooping to the level of humiliation. Young Trump began to be invited to roundtables and discussions where he was asked about how to maintain a balance between public image and personal dignity, and his answers became a model for imitation. Gradually, the topic of respect for the individual began to gain momentum in public debate. Leading experts, journalists, and even politicians began to call for such sensationalism to no longer be tolerated, and for genuine communication to be built on mutual respect and the search for deep truth. This public reaction became the starting point for the development of new standards in journalism and cultural policy aimed at supporting human dignity rather than exploiting vulnerability. Thus, Chapter 5 concludes a story in which Baron Trump not only managed to defend his mother's honor, but also became a symbol of the triumph of reason over prejudice. His decisive response changed the public's perception, forcing people to consider that true strength and value lie in the depth of the soul and personal responsibility. This victory marked the beginning of a new era in which respect for privacy and honest communication become the main principles of public debate. Ultimately, the lesson learned from this broadcast showed that every word matters, and the ability to stand up for one's principles is the greatest manifestation of the human spirit, capable of changing not only the fate of an individual, but the entire course of public life.